Welcome to Brain Balance Live. This is a show each week where I get to come on and literally pick Heather's brain about all the knowledge that she has about neurodiversity and our brains and our kids' brains and everything that's going on with them. I myself, Jen, am a brain balance parent myself. My son went through the program, and Heather is just a wealth of knowledge. She's a board certified cognitive specialist, a therapist. She's been the National Autism Summit speaker. The program has been touted by so much scientific research and industry right now. So Heather, is there anything else you want to do before we dive into our topic?
No, I'm just glad to be back.
Yes, we're so happy to be back. We've had some struggles for a couple of our lives, and we thank you all for being so patient with us because we know these lives bring you guys lots of information that you so desperately need. And I know that because I am very much in your shoes right now. Heather, what are we going to be talking about today?
I hear all the time, like, my child seemed to be prepared for the test. They knew the material, they test poorly, or they're so smart, what's holding them back academically? And I wanted to talk about study skills today, because what we think of how to really truly learn material and what science shows us works aren't always the same thing. There's some counterintuitive things involved there. So
yeah, I love that. I actually happened to be good at just listening in class and doing okay. And so I'm a terrible test taker. So I'm ready for these notes for myself.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of kiddos who can't, they're a walking encyclopedia, a lot of facts, but do they know how to generalize and apply the information? Hi, Debbie, how are you doing? Look how cute she is.
I know, she's adorable.
She is. So I think we can move on into the first slide. And this first one is studying requires active engagement. We talk about really getting kids engaged, and when they're interested in something, they're going to have more things to connect it to. Oh, wait, that, when I'm studying history. So when we won't go camping and don't have electrical outlets, I mean, anything you can apply it to when it is personally relevant actually impacts connections in the brain and being able to take bits and pieces and make more sense of them, picture the information. And then you kind of have multimodality learning going on, and it releases chemicals because now this applies to something I've experienced before. But what research shows us is that just rereading your notes, the textbook, underlining and highlighting, memorization are not considered active studying. They're only weakly related to learning. Does it mean these things are not important? No, because this is considered pre-studying. Yes, you need to read the material, find the high points. A lot of our kids have difficulty knowing what to underline or highlight because they can't distinguish the big deal.
I end up with the whole thing highlighted.
Right.
It's all important.
Right. And really, one way you could tell if your child is having difficulty with this is if they do have more than about 20% of the material highlighted, they're having difficulty seeing what are the big main concepts versus the supporting details. So these things are important, but if we just do this, are they going to know when the question is asked slightly differently? And testing is important because you have to pass the test to move through school, but there is more to learning than the score you make on the test. Do they actually know it? They need to know it well enough that next year they can bring in the material from the previous year and connect it and say, as they're learning the new material, bring in what they learned last year. And it just multiplies understanding. That's big picture versus details. A lot of that is what we're talking about here. So these things are important, but if that's all they're doing, you're going to have kids who can spout off all the answers. But also sometimes we tend to rehearse those things in the exact order they're in the textbook. And a lot of times tests will ask things from different chapters, different order from what actually happened. And if they don't know that, then they don't really know the material. They memorize some information.
Right.
So that's kind of just to kick us off. We can move on. But this I love this study cycle. And so how many of your kids are doing this before they even go to class? Skimming the chapter, looking. Sometimes we have to intentionally teach kids how textbooks are laid out. Help them understand the table of contents, the headings, Bold-faced words, if they're bold-faced words, those might be vocabulary words you need to know, or they're words that are going to help you understand the rest of the passage. Read the summaries. A lot of times books will start off with sort of a summary at the beginning and the end. What are the objectives? The objectives of the chapter are often listed bullet point wise. And though, as they're reading that and going through class and getting ready for tests, would I be able to answer the questions to those objectives? Generate questions you'd like the lecturer to answer. This is so powerful. What are you curious about? This is even good for younger kids who are reading stories and aren't to textbooks yet. Look at the cover of the book. What do you think this book is about? I've used the example before of Stan the Hot Dog Man. Why do you think it's called that? Who do you think the guy on the cover is? Why do you think he's called the Hot Dog Man? Oh, because he sells hot dogs, because he likes to eat hot dogs. Have them, what are you curious about in the story? That gets curiosity going. Now I'm engaged. I'm going to generate, what do you want to know about Stan? Now, as they're reading, they are looking for the answers to the questions they generated, and research shows us they will remember the story more. But do that whether your kids are in the youngest grades or moving through mid-late elementary, middle, and high school. During class, be involved, active engagement. And a lot of our kids have anxiety or other things getting in the way. By the way, if your kids can be extremely intelligent, but if they have trouble with emotional regulation, the emotional brain is in charge, and they might be impulsive, they're having more trouble paying attention. That is completely related to learning. They can't be using their logical brain in class. So things we talk about with emotional regulation are very important. And I'm going to show you some note-taking strategies lately. And then as soon as they can after class, I know sometimes when I was in school, I would have the start of a thought, and then I would just have to jump to the next thing because the teacher was talking faster than I could write. They need to go in. They're more likely to remember what that thought was and finish that thought in their notes. Mm-hmm. Fill in the gaps. Get with study buddies, other classmates. Hey, what did you get good notes about this section? And they can fill in their notes. Does any of that not make sense? What are some questions I have that I either need to ask another student, I need to ask the teacher, or I need to find in the textbook later? That so often doesn't happen. Big help there. Not to mention, not only are you filling in the gaps, but you are reviewing your notes to find where the gaps are. And so you're already kind of spacing out your learning and retrieval of the information. But repetition is crucial. Ask why, how, what if questions. A lot of times kids will memorize the what. They will memorize the dates, the names of the kernels. They will memorize the 3 parts, of lawmaking or whatever. But why is it that way? How does this work? And then think of scenarios. That gets deeper thinking than very just literal logical. This is going to help them with inferencing, connecting the dots. Engage in 3 to 5 intense short study sessions a day. And see, this is where you're reviewing notes and material from the week to connect the dots. I have a sort of demonstration of why this is important on the next page. But they need to be asking themselves, this requires metacognition, thinking about their thinking. Am I using effective study methods? And you may need to help your kids with this. We want them to fill in the gaps that they can, but you may need to help them think through this. If you keep getting the same scores, if you keep falling short, why? Because you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results again. Do I understand the material well enough to teach it to others? How fantastic. We talk about having one-on-one conversations with your kids. That needs to be about our day. It needs to be about connecting, but also what's something really interesting you learned today? When it comes to test time, can they explain what the test is about, what you're studying in class well enough that you would learn something new? One of the most effective methods of learning is to teach others. And so look at all of these stages. This is an ongoing, it's not the test is coming up, so start studying. This is all the time, all day, every day. Not all day, every day, but you know what I'm saying? Every day. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. And on the next page, you're going to see, I love this analogy. Really, if you try to pour in all the information right before a test, it's like trying to fill a water bucket that has holes in it. It's near the top, and you're just pouring in more information. It's going to spill over the top. It's just coming out the holes. But if you pour in gently you can keep filling the bucket with that information that is remembered and learned. You can only put so much in a container at a time without it overflowing. It's why I live in Houston. It's why it's more likely to flood when you get 3 inches of rain in an hour than if you get 3 inches of rain over the full day.
Yeah.
And that graphic on the right shows how much you forget when it's first learned versus when you review it. Look how less steep that forgetting curve is over time. Repetition, repetition, repetition.
Yeah. And it actually makes it look like you really do need to review quite a lot to keep that information in.
Yes. And there's such a difference between memorization. Memorization is part of learning, but it is not the whole thing. A lot of times the reason it looks like students are ready is because they have flashcards and they know on that flashcard what the answer is on the back of the flashcard.
Right.
When it is asked slightly different, do they actually understand it? Remembering, memorization, and understanding are not the same thing. The reason memorization is important, if I memorize my times tables, I'm not using any brain space to think of what 6 times 6 is.
Right.
So that when I come to a word problem, my whole brain is free to think about what's relevant and irrelevant to solve this. So it is important. But it doesn't mean I understand why is 6 times 6 36. It's different from me knowing that 6 times 6 is 36. But I mean, that applies to any subject.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. So many of our kids don't really know how to take notes. Kind of like we were talking about with highlighting and which thing is relevant to highlight, which one isn't. One of the most well-renowned and evidence-based methods of note-taking is the Cornell method, to really understand key ideas and relationships. And so during class, they're taking notes the best they can. And after class, they're figuring out what are the main ideas from these details that I wrote down. What are some questions I have about it? It really helps different regions of the brain communicate because I get the big concept and then I get the supporting details for that concept. And then when it comes to studying, you can fold your paper between these two columns and look at the questions that you generated when it was fresh on your mind. Look at the main ideas and see how many of the supporting details you can recall. So it just sets you up for studying really well. And you, of course, you can Google this and get lots of good information about Cornell. I like mapping for those kids who are visual or sometimes even having the main topic. What are we discussing today? Here is one main point from the teacher. Help them know what teachers might say to let them know that they're about to say a big concept. Sometimes it can be as obvious as, okay, you're going to want to know this for the test. Sometimes teachers actually say that. Help them know what to prioritize writing down if they're not able to get everything written down that they want to. If your kids are slow writers or have trouble getting their thoughts onto paper, watch a couple of the recent shows we've done on handwriting and written expression. If your kids are having trouble with organization, I've done an entire organization show that you could go back and watch. But this really shows the hierarchy and the things underneath it. Sometimes that visualization makes it click for what's the difference between a detail and a main idea and how do things go together. And then that can translate into knowledge across the board. Okay. And then charting. If you're in this is often good if you're in a class if you're in a statistics class, if you are in any sort of class that is very much about stats and figures and details, a lot of these, depending on the level of your students and where they are developmentally on different abilities, a lot of students will use different types of note-taking for different classes. So if you have a very fact-laden, figure-laden class, charting is one of the best. Outlining, when I was growing up, outlining was a much bigger deal, it seems, than it is in today's world. 100%. But it really helps the brain formulate Roman numeral 1, A, and then what are the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s underneath Roman numeral 1? Just by indenting, you start seeing the main idea and the more defined detail it becomes. And then if your kids have difficulty with big picture and details and organizing their mind, they can just write sentences, and then you can help teach them to start kind of getting them into hierarchies later. Just get them to write it down. That is, they're having trouble with this. Let's just get it written down. That is the most basic form. I wanted to just, it's really worth pulling these up and talking about them, and depending on the development of your son or daughter, talk about these, some of the pros and cons of each one for the way they learn, because what's the best one is the one that works best for them. But if they are at a level where they can say, this one makes sense to me, I think I want to try this one, getting their buy-in, and then it was their idea, they're going to probably do better on it. And if they really can't come up with that, talk out loud about it and say, I'm thinking this one for this class. What do you think about that? Why? We want to grow independent problem solvers, but sometimes we have to step in, especially if they have neurodevelopmental struggles, and help them get there. Okay, let's move on. So the spacing it out is what we talked about, because you saw that learning curve and the forgetting curve. Really space it out. Multiple short bursts of reviewing things over time. Remember the bucket with the holes, overflowing the bucket versus giving the bucket time to absorb the water. Practice exams and testing yourself. It's not just about rereading your notes and looking at highlights and underlines. Create questions. Having a study buddy, especially as kids get a little bit older, what if they all generate questions? One of the things we did in grad school, I had a study group. There were 6 of us in there, and there was so much material to read that we would take different chapters and we would put down notes for the chapter and then share them with the others in our group, so we weren't having to read all of the material. And then we would get together and discuss it and ask questions. And we were so prepared. We learned so much by discussing it. If they're younger, have those discussions with your kids. You can come up with questions, but don't just come up with questions about listing material that they're memorizing. Ask it in a way where they have to apply it. Why did Colonel so-and-so do this? How did that relate to this? Think about the what if, how, why questions. Ask the teacher if they have practice tests. Know where information is on Google Classroom or whatever. Even before the past year and a half, a lot of teachers were putting a lot of very valuable information on some sort of platform, but what a lot of times parents were saying, they didn't know that. They didn't know how to get in. Make sure you know where that information is. Make sure your kids know where that information is. Teach others. Have them teach you something. Have them apply something they're learning. If it's math, have them apply that concept to cooking. Mix topics and types of practice. You don't just want to learn things one way. A lot of times, kids, if they are doing a math worksheet and all of these are converting fractions to decimals, they can do it. If they're doing just a worksheet where it's doing it the opposite way, or it's converting decimals to percentages, they can do that. But what about when you mix them up? So don't just practice one thing at a time. Take questions from chapter 3 and chapter 1 and chapter 2 and mix them up and practice. Pictures, graphs, visual aids. We've talked about concept mapping. Play around with this. Google visual learning aids. I've got a really good one on the next page for you. And that one, it's the Freuder Model. I've talked about it before on the organization show. It is one of the best ways to learn. Have them think of examples of a concept that they're learning, especially if it's abstract. A lot of our kids who are so good at memorization, they're memorizing literal, concrete information. How do you apply it in the abstract? What are some examples of when this is not true? They need to know when things are true and when they're not true. Make and schedule your plan. You need to schedule in study time throughout the week, just like you do homework time for the thing that's due tomorrow. Because if it's on the schedule, this is the schedule we plan. How many times your kids come home and say, I don't have any homework today? What a great day to review information. And they're going to be so glad they did down the road.
And that is like so good that you say that, because for me, sometimes if it is not scheduled, it's really easy for me to get like railroaded over and like, no, I don't need to do that. And it's sometimes a struggle when you first start implementing something like that. But once it's routine and he's used to it, he kind of accepts that like that's what we're doing. So I love that you said.
Yeah, it becomes the routine. Neri, he is such a thought leader on distractibility and what that really means. Distractibility, how do you know if it's a distraction if you don't know what it is you're supposed to be doing right now? And he says, be a schedule builder, not a to-do list maker. When we have to-do lists, what do? I mean, we think of what's the easiest thing to knock off on here? What is the one I'm dreading just keeps getting pushed off. And that to-do list can get so long.
Yeah.
But you schedule it in and we follow the schedule. You schedule your values, you schedule, when it becomes part of the routine and this is what we go by, it's also not, Mom's making me study. I mean, I don't have homework. And we still want them to have free time. We want them to get out. We want exercise. We want all of those things. But this is so much better than cramming the night before. And then it's not just about what they make on the test. They didn't actually learn it. And now they're falling behind in that class. We want solid knowledge that they're building on, solid understanding. Elaborate, don't simply reread. That goes back to everything we've been talking about. Can they teach it to others? They need to generate questions and you help generate questions for them. Get a study group together. I tell you, when doing doctoral work, I feel like I almost remember every single thing that we studied because, and man, we had a lot of material to read. And every week we're writing research papers, but each course, the professor would give us study questions that they would give us a couple to choose from. And we needed to answer it and support our answer in a post to the whole class. And then we were to respond and to what that person said. And if we, about our take on it or how we had a different take on it, or I agree and here's why. So it was a very respectful, but I mean, you want to talk about deep conversations. And we were pulling in things from our careers because almost all of us had lots of professional experience that we were pulling on, and we would share examples, going back to the examples of what we were talking about a lot of psychology, a lot of abstract concepts, a lot of different philosophies of learning and education, et cetera, emotions, I mean, on and on. And I mean, with those, I would, as you are formulating a response, because you have to back it with research, but you're also using your own thoughts, your own experience, and you're hearing what everyone else had to say. We didn't have tests in that class, in any of those classes, never. We never had an exam, but we were graded on those interactions online and on our research papers.
Wow.
And I remember, I think, almost everything that I learned in those classes. I mean, it just flows off my tongue. And I can't think of a day where I don't use that information and it doesn't connect dots to something else.
Wow.
That's elaborating. Study groups are so, so powerful. And if you can't do it in person, having an online discussion like that, I learned more in those classes than any I've ever taken. So, and if you have any kids who are really struggling with self-confidence or perfectionism, rejection sensitivity, help them understand that mistakes boost understanding. That you learn more a lot of times from what you got wrong than from what you did right, because you go back and look at why did you get it wrong. As a parent, it's really good to say, wow, you got this part right this time. Talk about how did you come up with this answer? I see so much progress here because the first two steps of this you got right this time. So you're looking for progress. We don't just celebrate the right answer. We're looking for progress. Tell me what came more easily for you this time. But how mistakes are cool because they need to understand that because a lot of kids will get paralyzed and I don't know how to do this, so I won't do it at all, or get it, or they feel defeated when they get an answer wrong. But when they look for why they got it wrong, they're more likely to remember that than anything else.
For sure.
I was talking to a colleague the other day, and he said that one time he forgot to check one box on a form for some paperwork for a family. He said, I will go to my deathbed always knowing where that box is.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, they got to have a growth mindset. A lot of times that's what gets kids task avoidance, and until they think they can do it perfectly, they don't want to do it at all. Yeah. So we have to be intentional about saying that to kind of reframe that for them.
I love that.
Okay, let's move on. And this is an example of the Freuder model. You can use this for any subject. This particular example is with polygons. But in one square, you put the squares can be different things. If you want to pull up Freuder models for XYZ class, for math class or language arts or whatever, you're going to see these 4 quadrants of a Freuder model can be different things that are befitting the subject, that are befitting the way your child learns and where they struggle. But in one box, you have a definition, and it's better if kids write definitions in their own words, just like it's better to have kids repeat what you ask them to do in their own words instead of verbatim, because now you're gauging understanding. What are characteristics? They're understanding polygon is the big picture. The characteristics are some details that support that this is a polygon. What are some examples? What are some non-examples? One of these squares could be application. How do I apply this to XYZ? They are thinking about the same topic in different ways. When we talk about mixing it up, I need to think about examples, non-examples. When is this true? When is it not true? Putting things in their own words. One of these can drawing. A lot of times kids like to doodle, and now you get them a little more interested because they're drawing an example of something, So look up Freuder model, Freuer. It is one of the most powerful ways to learn and connect the dots.
Love that.
But there are a lot of different visual aids you can use. Freuder is one of my absolute favorites because it uses your brain in different ways and connects the dots and really helps with generalization and application. Okay. And metacognition, thinking about my thinking. There are so many questions that could be listed here, but I found this one and I'm like, okay, I'm going to share this. Is this before they're doing something? Is this similar to a previous task? What do I already know about this? What do I want to achieve? What does my teacher want me to achieve? How does that relate to what I want to achieve? What should I do first? So many kids get bogged down with time management and task avoidance or procrastination because when they're trying to think about where to start, every single part of this feels like the big deal. They don't have that ability to think this is the Roman numeral and these are the supporting characters, the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Right.
And so just getting that concept going is progress. Am I on the right track? What can I do differently? Who can I ask for help? Do I have a stuck point? Because a lot of times kids don't go and ask the teachers because they don't know what to ask. These are some good questions if they're not to the point of asking these things to themselves yet, sit down and intentionally teach this. Maybe you need to start off by asking some of these questions so that you can train them to. And talk about why you're thinking about it this way. And after, what worked well? What could I have done better? How can I apply this to a new situation? They should need to be gauging. Sometimes even reading comprehension breaks down because kids don't have a brake pedal to think about their thinking. If they don't understand something, they just keep buzzing on through it. They need to be able to sit. Did that make sense to me? If not, I need to go back and reread it.
Yeah.
Okay, these are just some examples, but get them thinking about their thinking and understand that so many times kids don't know where to start, so they don't start at all.
Wow, you're reading me right there.
And I'm not going to, this sort of just is a summary of, this is called Bloom's Taxonomy in the education world. Why kids seem to know so much information and then they're not doing well in class. So many times what we think of as being ready for a test is that they can remember it. They can recite the information. I think I've said a few times now, that is not true learning. It's necessary. It frees the sketch pad so I can connect the dots. I do need to memorize some information, but that is not the same as knowing how to apply it. I need to understand it, be able to interpret it, explain it to someone else. How is this alike? How is it different? Compare, contrast. That, by the way, that skill is also very important for decision making. If I don't know how to compare and contrast options, how do I know what the best choice is? Predict. Some of our kids lack predictive skills. If you have kids who live in anxiety, one of the sources of that usually is that I can't predict my world. If I can't predict my world, I also may have difficulty predicting what's going to happen next in class in this story. And that is a skill that they need. Giving examples. Then I need to be able to apply it. I got to solve that problem, show my work. A lot of kids hate showing their work because I get it on some level, but I don't really get why it's this way. Look at all these words that go with that. Solve, show, use, illustrate, complete, classify, compare, design, analyze it. investigate. Think about when they're getting ready for research papers. Distinguish, compare, separate. It's true in this situation, but not in another one. Evaluate, judge, select, decide, justify. Justify why you feel that way about what the author said about this topic. So many kids get tripped up on, I am supposed to write an opinion paper about this research-based information. Which is it? Do you want the fact or do you want an opinion? They don't see how it can be both.
Yeah.
Creating. And by the way, they may have trouble with this. If you have kids who are debaters and man, there goes, I'm right, you're wrong. They're having trouble evaluating. If they have trouble with that in a conversation with you, it can really impact them in school. They may have flown through the early grades. Now that it's time to be able to apply this level of knowledge and you see things going downhill, this can be one of the reasons why. And then creating. That is when we're inventing, composing, predicting, planning, imagining, constructing, designing. This is such an innovative century we're in. This is really what they're going to be called upon to do in life. So I don't know how often we think of learning as this many layers. But thinking, noticing, wandering, seeing, feeling, predicting. When you apply text plus thinking, that is when you're doing real reading. Not just when you can spout off what it says in black and white. This is where there is a big downfall as kids move on through the grades. And it goes from telling me what the text says to read between the lines, infer, add your spin to it.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to connect all those dots. Okay.
I love that. Oh my goodness. As you can see, we've got all of the ways that you can follow Heather and get a hold of Heather. And, as I was listening to you, I just totally forgot to mention, if you have questions, if you've watched this on the replay, even for our viewers who are here while we were live, if any questions popped into your head, please, please, please drop them in the comments box. Heather will either try to answer them right away, or heck, we might even plan a show based on the question that you had because it gave us an idea for a topic. So please write those questions in there. Follow her at The Hidden Turn, and make sure that you contact a Brain Balance Center to get an assessment if that is something that you're kind of looking for support for. Heather, just tell them really quickly, now you don't only just handle children, you also can help adults too. Isn't that right?
Yes, we work with the little ones all the way through adult. Now we're having more and more adults come in. And I mean, we have families we work with where they're doing well, but something's just not quite clicking on the level. I want to thrive. I want to take it next level. We have some with profound struggles. We have some that are somewhere in the middle, and we have some that are already way up here. I want to take it next level. I just want to be the best version of myself. Yeah. And so, we are working with all ages, and we have for the longest time, as we were meeting with parents, they would kind of identify certain, like, you know what, I've always struggled with that. I didn't know it didn't have to be that way. Where's the program for us? Yeah. And so we spent years putting it together, and we love being able to work with a lot of the adults we work with are the parents of the kids we work with. Not always, but it's become a real family affair.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely see myself in so many of these conversations. So I'm ready to hop a plane and get on over there. I love it. All right. Well, I will see you very, very soon. We are going to be changing our regularly scheduled lives here soon, and we'll make sure that this week, Heather.
It glitched for me a little bit, but I will share that we're back Thursday at 3:35, Dr. Brian and I. And then we are doing, and in case you missed it, next week until the following week when we get on our new schedule on Tuesday mornings.
Yes, I love that. All righty, Heather. Well, you have a beautiful day. I'll see you soon.
You too. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.